Welcome to Luminescence, Common Sense Spirituality, a show designed to share spiritual insights with you so that you can comprehend the universe and how it functions. You are about to experience raised consciousness. This is a place where spiritual principles are shared with the goal of assisting you to expand your understanding of both the seen and unseen worlds. Luminescence Common Sense Spirituality helps you to discern the timeless truths handed down from wise sages through the ages, from the airy-fairy nonsense that is being taught today. Now, here is your host, Sharon Lynn Wyeth.
Welcome to Luminescence Common Sense Spirituality. I'm Sharon Lynn Wyeth, creator of Namology Science, the ability to know all about a person's personality and a soul's purpose from a person's name. And you can book a reading with me and order my books at my website, knowthename.com, if you'd like to connect. And I would like to remind everybody that on today's newsletter, I asked for your opinion. I'm really serious about reading those and getting back to you, and I would really appreciate your response. Now, the beautiful, inspirational music you just heard is part of the song Shine by Dee L'Amour. You can hear more of her music by visiting DLamour.com. That's D like in David, LEMOR.com. And she's also available on all streaming platforms. Now, our topic today is evil and how it started and what we can do about it. There are many names for Satan. And so how do we recognize this? And how did evil even get started? And how does it creep into our lives? And what can we do to counteract it? And why does it even exist? What's its purpose? And do we see an end of evil when humankind progresses past duality? Now, there's many names for Satan, from Baal and Molech and Set and Satan and Baphomet. And there's just so many, and yet it all comes down to the same. And yet it's out there to fool us, or does it just show up in all these different beings? So our special guest to talk with us today is J.J. Dewey. Now, J.J. is going to start joining us every other month on the third Thursday. I am thrilled that he's doing this for us as one of our regulars this year, because he's an author, a lecturer, and is best known from his books, the Immortal series. Now, the first, the Immortal, books 1 and 2, were published in 1998. These were followed by The Lost Key of the Buddha and Eternal Words, book 3 and 4. He's written numerous other books that he prints on demand for those who want to read more. The portion of the website, which is often referred to as the Keys Archives, is where posts to both discussion groups made by J.J. Dewey are now being archived. And the content of the original post has been extracted and reformatted, so it's all easy to read, web browser-friendly document, which is referred to as an article. Now, included in these archived articles are also all the chapters from several complete books which he's written. There are also many other extended essays and treatises on subjects as diverse as metaphysics, religion, spirituality, popular, social, interpersonal, and relationship issues, nuclear power, alternative energy, the environment, politics, global warming, you name it. He seems to have covered it if it involves mankind as it important for us. In addition to the links found in the Standard Keys Archived Index, links to the chapters of JJ's books and links to his essays, treatises, and other popular topics have been gathered together into subjective collections and placed in a 3-part subsection of the Keys Archived entitled From the Archives. Now, the easiest thing is to read his first book free, and it's literally on freeread.com. You'll get hooked just like I did years ago. I mean, his work is just spectacular. You also might want to check out the book of quotes. We've given quotes from JJ on a wide range of subjects. You will find that in my books, I quote him often. So welcome, JJ. So great to have you join me.
Well, great to be here, and thanks for that tremendous introduction. I ought to record that and use it.
Oh, you're cute. So our topic today is evil, and you are such an expert on the Bible. We want to know, why did there get to be evil? I mean, I guess you have to have duality, but talk to us about evil.
Well, there's duality everywhere, even in the prime source of creation, there has to be some type of duality, or else duality could never manifest. And even if you go to the purest state of non-duality, there's still a trace or an idea of duality existing there, or else it could never manifest the way it is for us here. So, but when you go back to the source, then there appears to be no duality. There appears to be just complete union. And some of the basic teachings in theosophy, ancient wisdom, Hinduism, and even the Course in Miracles tell us that you go back to the unmanifest, the source where there seems to be no duality. There is no what we would call good or evil. It's completely like non-existent there. And the Course in Miracles has an interesting take on this. It says that in this original state that we were in, there were certain sons of God that become curious about what it would be like to create a world that's different from the peaceful heavenly existence they were in. And so they decided to break off and create a world with both good and evil in. And the source intelligence was against this because he did not believe in evil. Okay, so what we had is the Trinity, the Father, Son, the Holy Ghost, so to speak. The Father doesn't have anything to do with evil or good or the duality itself. But the Son wanted to experiment. And the Son was given all the powers of the Father. So when he creates, it's like God creating. And in the book of John, chapter 1, it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and all things were made by this Word. And so, which is the Son. So the Son, according to the Course in Miracles, as well as the ancient Gnostics, taught the same thing. And they say that the Son then created the universe where good and evil will manifest. And when the Son did this, he kind of like got trapped in this creation. Now, the way I look at it personally is that we as entities in our primordial state were like one being. We were joined as one. We were parts in a great oneness. And we decided we wanted to experiment and do something different, where there was change, time, space, and all these things, and games. And we're very attracted to games. We just, as entities, we just love games. I mean, what do people do on the weekends with the day off? They watch games on TV, they watch game shows. We're just addicted to games. Kids just love computer games with avatars.
Well, just look at the games on phones. You see everybody on their phone all the time.
Right. And in our mortal existence, where there was no duality, there was no games. So we wanted to play games, and this is my take on it as to why we came here and why there's evil. Because what is a good game without an adversary? And what does the word Satan mean in the Hebrew? It means adversary. So you have to have a good adversary to have a good game if you're going to have fun. So without a good opponent, you cannot have a fun game. And so we decided to create the whole universe for the fun of it, for the game of it. So we're big gamesters, and even in a lot of esoteric thought, they say that the physical reality is really kind of a holographic projection. It's like your body is really like an avatar in one of these computer games. In the computer game, you have an avatar, and then that's like you. Your body is like an avatar, okay? This controlled by an intelligence higher than yourself that you have lost full contact with. And so we're kind of a reflection of our higher self, but our higher self isn't merged with us. And that's what we're trying to do right now. We're trying to reconnect with our higher self. So that's why evil is in the world to begin with, because we've created a game. And we come down here with the idea of solving all the problems in this game that we made. And we're challenged to the core. So each life that we're in as individuals, we're trying to solve all the problems in this super game. And then when we get down here to solve the problems, we complain about it because we think we don't remember that we created the game. And we don't remember that we eagerly decided to play it. But here we are.
Okay, I have a question on that, JJ. Isn't that kind of like, or the similar to when they say that the creator of the problem in your life is you, and you created your problem so that you can solve them, and we actually hold some kind of resentment for those people trying to help us solve our problems, because then we just have to create a bigger version of it because we want to go through the exercise of solving our own problems?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Every problem that we have in life was designed for us before we were born. And before we were born, you can actually, there's simulations there in the world of the soul where we can simulate what our life may be like. Now, it's impossible to predict everything in your life, but there's simulations where we can look and say, now, if I make this decision, this is going to happen. And we come down with clues as to people that we meet that's going to be important to us. So when we do meet them, there's just kind of a bell goes off in our head that says, hey, pay attention to this person. And so we have little clues implanted in us as to how we're supposed to play this game that we were in. And but solving the game, we've made solving this game tremendously difficult, a lot harder than any computer game that's been devised for kids to play. This is a very difficult game, but we made it difficult because we've been around for an eternity. And so we've had an eternity to figure out, to solve things. And then every time we solve one game, we want to make the next game harder so that we're challenged again. And so we come down here and we complain about our lives being hard, but that's the way we designed it. And like you say, we're responsible for everything that we find ourselves in, but we just don't have the consciousness to remember it all. It's kind of interesting.
Well, it's almost kind of scary because it means that you've got to take responsibility for everything that happens to you in your life, and you don't get to blame somebody else.
Yeah, and people just love to blame everything on somebody else, and this is the standard version of Satan was created so we'd have somebody to blame. You know, something goes wrong. Well, Satan did this. There's a lot of people who find the devil under every rock, and they blame the devil for everything that goes wrong in their life. But 99% of the stuff that happens is that we blame on the devil is just stuff that we engineered ourselves. Now, there are dark entities, but the really intelligent dark entities don't mess around with little old ladies and people like that. They are interested in controlling important people, especially like important politicians and people with power to do something. That's where their interest is. They aren't very interested in just mom and pop kettle type people.
So you're saying that as someone advances into a more public position, that their challenges get greater, or there's more temptations?
Well, yeah, there's masters on the dark side and masters on the light side, and both of the groups of masters are looking for people with talent that they can work with. They don't want to waste their time. So if they some guy is just a regular construction worker, wants to drink beer and watch football on the weekends, they're not really much use to either side for accomplishing anything. But if somebody's a senator or something like that, then or maybe a preacher that has a lot of influence, or a teacher or a writer, they will try to implant in their minds different ideas that they come up with that will manipulate people. And people that are in the light, focused in the soul, are impervious to messages from the dark side. But people that are into what's in it for me, they're very sensitive to impressions from the dark side.
Okay, so when we come back from our first break here, we want to know how we can tell whether the messages we're getting in our heads, whether we think they're our own thoughts or they're being impressed upon us. Stay tuned. We'll find out right after this break.
Your conscious connection to a more mindful world. OMTimes Radio, IOM FM. OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of OMTimes Magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going On? My passion is sifting through information, research, and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers, and researchers, pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics, and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
Are you feeling lost, confused, absolutely clueless? No way out, over, under, or through? Then it's time to have the Light Keepers, through their conduit, Lynn Wyeth, guide you by shining their light, illuminating the right path for you. Let Sharon share the wisdom of the ancient masters to guide you on what is coming next for you and to show you the silver lining in your current circumstances. Contact Lynn Wyeth at info@knowthename.com for a joyful, info-packed Light Keepers session.
These are the sounds of a dinner that almost didn't happen. A dinner now served, thanks to people like you. Due to COVID-19, 17 million more Americans may face hunger. Feeding America is helping our neighbors in need. And if you're able, you can too. Donations are being accepted at feedingamerica.org/coronavirus. Brought to you by the Ad Council and Feeding America, 200 food banks strong.
Welcome back to Luminescence. You're with Lynn Wyeth, and our special guest today is J.J. Dewey. You can find more of his work and his first book absolutely free to read, called The Immortal, on his website, freeread.com, and that's because you get to read it for free. Easy one to remember, freeread.com. So right before the break, we were talking about how you can receive messages in your head or in your mind. So, JJ, how would we know if those messages originate with us or from a positive or a negative source? How would we recognize the difference?
Okay, first of all, if a person is centered in the soul, then he doesn't really get any dark messages at all if he's centered in his higher self. It's only if he goes against his higher self, if he gets a message that he's supposed to do, say, a certain work or something, and then he ignores it and doesn't do it. And it's like turning down the light, the power of a light really slowly. You don't really notice you're losing the light if you turn it down slowly. And but if you turn it right back on suddenly, you can see, wow, I didn't realize the light was that dim. And so if you stay in the light, there's not a lot to worry about as far as getting really destructive messages. It's if you don't follow the light that you know is true and you go against it, then your inner light starts to dim. And if it dims, then it becomes hard to tell. And so the basic way for the average person to tell if something is on the light or dark side is two ways. Number one, if he's in contact with his higher self, he can tell pretty much right away. If he hears somebody teaching something that is not in the light, he will recognize it immediately if he's in connection with his higher self. If he's not in connection, then he won't know. He'll think, well, that sounds good. That must be the light. And there's a lot of people that have studied half a dozen different teachers, and they all say different stuff, but they accept them all. Yet even though they contradict, they don't think about it, they don't discriminate, they don't discern. And so you have to have a certain amount of discernment. And many people are left completely to their minds. And if we're left completely to our minds, there is one principle that stands out above everything else to determine the light and the dark. And that's the principle of freedom. That which is on the dark side. Now, both sides, the light and the dark, both proclaim they are for freedom. But the dark side is for the freedom of the individual self, the heck with the whole. The light side is for freedom for everybody. Maximum freedom from the top to the bottom is what they want. Now, to get maximum freedom, you do have to have certain laws. You can't have freedom to burglarize your neighbor's house and stuff like that. But it's what I call maximum freedom. Now, what's interesting, it's very difficult for people to discern this principle for some odd reason. But once the principle of discerned is discerned, then you can tell. Because say the Old South, for instance, they thought that they were fighting for freedom. And they sincerely thought that the black race was better off being slaves because that's what they were born to be. So they thought enslaving them was good. Okay? And Abraham Lincoln made the comment that, boy, those people down there have a weird idea what freedom is. But they weren't looking for the freedom of the whole. They were looking for freedom for themselves because the slaves made their lives easier and give some individuals more freedom. Same thing with the Roman Empire. They had all kinds of slaves, and they figure the people that owned the slaves thought that the slaves give them more freedom because it freed up their time. But the principle of freedom is where you have maximum freedom for all. Those that are against this support the dark side. Those who support maximum freedom for all are on the light side. Now, it's interesting how they twist things around. Now, you look at both sides, two political sides of an issue. For people with common sense, it's obvious which side will support the greatest freedom for all. but both sides will claim to be for freedom, and so they will they will say that they will both make their case. But for those that can see through the eyes of the Spirit, it's obvious which side will support the greater freedom. And any comments or questions on that before I move on?
No, I always looked at that. I read that in some of your writings years ago, and when I was a school administrator making decisions, that was one of the key things I always asked about: which one gives the teachers greater freedom, because therefore they would pass that on to the student, hopefully.
Oh,
Yeah. So I've always appreciated that perspective. And the other one, I literally have one of your bumper stickers on my washing machine that says, "Follow the highest that you know." So it's like a constant reminder that even when it's unpleasant, or even when we'd rather do something else because it would give us temporary pleasure, that we are called to always follow the highest we know. And I have turned that into a saying that says, when we do our best, and that means following the highest we know, when we do our best, God does the rest.
Yeah.
That we can
on this principle of freedom, probably one of the best examples might be our taxing system. Now, if the taxing system is such, it's fair that people paying the taxes feel that, well, this is a fair amount of tax, I don't mind paying it, and people get benefits from those taxes, then fine, the principle of freedom is not violated. But if you have people paying way more taxes than they would be willing to, then they think it's fair, and those extra taxes are going to benefit maybe 10% of the population, where they get a lot of benefit. They say, boy, this brings us more freedom. So you're having 10% of the population get more freedom, and maybe 50% of the population getting less freedom. So the principle of freedom is violated when the taxes are beyond what the people think is fair. And one of the problems we have with our society is there's only about 50% of the people even pay federal income tax. Yet in voting, 100% of the people get a vote on our politicians' taxes. So the principle of freedom is, in the taxing system, for instance, is very difficult to implement, and it's also difficult for people to see where the point of balance is, because there's always a balance between what's maximum freedom and what takes away from maximum freedom. But
and would people disagree on what the freedom is, or what freedom is, or like what constitutes freedom itself?
Well, everybody realizes that as an individual, if I'm free to just go do what I want to do, that's freedom. But freedom applies to more than just an individual. It applies to the whole. So like I say, if the people in the Old South, if they owned slaves, they were more free because they had slaves. But that didn't mean there was more freedom. There was actually less freedom for the whole. So the freedom of the whole is what we have to look upon, is the maximum number of people in the group have the maximum freedom that could be had. You can never have ultimate complete freedom, because there has to be laws governing certain things. But there is what I call maximum freedom, and that's what we want. And if we have maximum freedom, most of the people will feel that everything is running fairly, and that's the important thing. And,
at this point in time in our politics, JJ, it seems like we are constricting more and more. Do you think there will be an eruption of people saying, no, we've been a good sport long enough, and so we want our freedom back?
Yeah, you thought that we used to think the people in Australia, they were really independent people, especially after the Crocodile Dundee movie come out. We thought, boy, they were really independent, but they have clamped down on those people, and they didn't get a lot of resistance from taking away a number of their freedoms over the past couple of decades. And I was thinking, boy, I hope we would be stronger than that. But you just never know for sure. I think within the United States, we have a lot of people that are willing to fight for their freedoms if it comes down to it. A lot more than a lot of other countries. People from other countries I've talked to say that, well, yeah, in my country they say people pretty much go along with what the government says, but they don't necessarily do that here. They're doing it more and more often. They say the millennials are very into doing what the government says and not questioning or not doubting what the authorities tell them. So that's a little bit discouraging. But the older people over 30 and 40, they're a lot of them are still willing to stand up and question things. And we need to question everything. And this is what makes evil prevail, is when just people don't question. They say, well, I guess the doctor tells me to do this, or I guess the preacher says to do this. I guess that's what I should do. But people need to question everything. And like, say, during the hippie generation, the big bumper sticker was question authority. And that was what the liberals used. Now the liberal side, now the conservative side is using that, question authority. And so it's kind of switched around a lot. It's kind of interesting.
Well, don't you think things switch and flop back and forth over time? I mean, just even in what's in fashion. I mean, the things that were way in fashion 50 years ago seem to all be coming back.
Yeah, everything swings like a pendulum, from a pendulum to, and this is what my book 3 is about in my series, The Philosophy of the Buddha, is about how the pendulum swings back and forth between conservative or liberal, left or right, good and evil, and so on. And that swinging back and forth, as it swings back and forth, there's a center point where the point of good judgment is. And that's where the point of truth is. And as it swings over there, a handful of people begin to get a glimpse of the actual truth. And then after it swings to the far left or right, people begin to lose sight of that truth. But eventually, the pendulum slows down. So eventually, as we progress, we will be closer and closer to the center, which is truth. And we'll be closer and closer to seeing what the principle of freedom really is. Because it's interesting that almost every speech that Hitler gave, he talked about fighting for freedom, and you'd think he'd be the last guy who was interested in freedom. But yeah, he wanted freedom for the Aryan race, and that was about all. But freedom for everybody else, that didn't really count that much. But,
well, and he was addressing most of the time the Aryan race, so they all bought into it, or pretended to for their own salvation. So, how can we start to counteract evil? Well,
the esoteric writings put a good spin on what evil is. The writings through Alice A. Bailey says this, is that evil is going backwards in our evolution, and good is that which takes us forward. So when we had World War II, we had the Hitler and his bunch wanting to take us back to the authoritarian type government. That's the way it was in the past. And the Allied nations wanted to take us forward to greater democracy, where there was greater freedom. And so they were taking us forward in evolution, whereas the enemy was trying to take us backwards in evolution. And the same thing with our lives. Within our lives, we're confronted with things that take us forward in our evolution and backwards. So that which takes us backward is esoteric evil. That's which takes us forward towards spirit is esoteric good. Now, some people say there's no such thing as good and evil, and the ultimate reality that may be true, but in where we are now, there is definitely good and evil. There is progression towards spirit, and there's progression toward darkness. And so we have, every choice that we make in life takes us one direction or the other, takes us forward or backwards. And so to recognize good, we merely ask, will this take me closer toward truth and light? And that's what you want to know more than anything.
Okay, we've got another break coming up. After this break, we're going to talk about how we can develop discernment even better. Stay tuned.
A conscious lifestyle for a mindful life. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
Vox Novus, the new voice. Vox Novus, the new dimension. Vox Novus, thought and movement leaders who will share from their experience and offer tools to help us navigate our rapidly changing world. My name is Victor Furman. Join me every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio for Vox Novus, the new voice.
Mark Twain said the two most important days in your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why. The why is hidden in your name. Sharon Lynn Wyeth has created a scientific way of deciphering your name to reveal your contract for this lifetime. And your name even specifies the 7 areas that are subsets of your soul's overall goal. Your name identifies who you are to both yourself and others. What does your name say about you? Contact Sharon Lynn Wyeth at info@knowthename.com for your stunning name review.
If I could be you,
and you could be me,
for just 1 hour,
if you could find a way
to get inside
each other's mind,
walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
We've all felt left out, and for some, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We can change that. Learn how at belongingbeginswithus.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Welcome back. Listening to Luminescence, Common Sense Spirituality. I'm your host, Sharon Lynn Wyeth, and my special guest today is J.J. Dewey, author of the Immortal series and much, much more. You can find a ton of information that'll keep you reading for a long time at his website, freeread.com, along with his first book is absolutely free at freeread.com. Okay, JJ, you were saying that those things that bring us toward the light help us versus those things, and they're good, versus those things that take us away from the light. So how would you define light to begin with? And then what other goals or tools can we use to help develop our discernment?
Well, light is that which reveals. What's interesting is we all see the sun shining up there now. If you go into space beyond our atmosphere, you're bathing yourself in the light of the sun, but you turn around and look at the sky, you're just outside of the stars, there's just blackness. you do not see any of the sun's light at all, even if you're and you're surrounded by light, but you don't see it in space. And the only reason we see light is when there's contrast. When light then shines on us here upon the earth, we have contrast, and that produces vision. And that contrast is the shadows and the darkness. So the light and the darkness together produce light that we can actually see with our physical eyes. Now there's theories that the spiritual eyes doesn't need the contrast, that they can see in all directions and through all things and so on. But as far as the light that we're familiar with, the contrast in this dimension we're in helps us to be able to see. And then when we see the contrast, we see good and evil, and then we can discern between good and evil. And speaking of light, you might be, your listeners might be interested in some information I have on Lucifer from the Bible, because the Bible teaches an entirely different take on Lucifer than people have interpreted it. They get this from Isaiah, where it says, "How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? Art thou cut down to the ground, which did weaken the nations? But thou hast said in thy heart, I will ascend to heaven, and I will exalt myself above the stars of God." Now, because of this one verse, people think that Lucifer is the same as the devil. But Lucifer actually means bringer of light. Now, why would the devil or the Satan be called the bringer of light? And what's interesting is Lucifer appears several times in the New Testament, but it's mistranslated. In 2 Peter, we have this: "We have a more sure word of prophecy, whereunto ye do well that ye take heed, as to the light that shineth in a dark place, until the day dawn and the day star arise in our hearts." Now the words day star is taken from the Greek word for Lucifer, which is phosphoros. Okay, so let's translate this literally then. He says, "Whereunto a light that shineth in the dark place until the day dawn and Lucifer arise in your hearts." So here was Peter was given a prayer that Lucifer would arise in our hearts. Okay? In other words, Peter was going by what the word Lucifer actually means, which is bringer of light. Until the bringer of light arises in your hearts. That's what he was actually praying for. Now, Lucifer is also means the same as the morning star. The morning star is Venus, and Venus is often equated with Lucifer. And here in Revelations, we're told, "I will give him the morning star." The one that overcomes all things will be given the morning star. And Jesus said of himself, "I am the offspring of David, the bright and morning star." In other words, Jesus was saying, "I am the root and the offspring of David, and I am Lucifer." So how could Jesus be Lucifer? And we can find this out by going to Job. It says, God was asking Job, he says, "Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Declare if thou hast understanding, who hath laid the measures thereof." He says, "Whereupon are the foundations fastened, or who laid the cornerstone, when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy?" So here, the morning stars are Lucifers. They sang together, and they're equated with the sons of God that shouted for joy. So before, at the creation of the earth, there were entities that were called Lucifers, or morning stars. And they were the ones that put the earth together, and there was one apparently that rebelled. And he was a rebellious one that was cast out. And he was a fallen Lucifer. He was a fallen morning star. And so this has the unfortunate effect of noting that there was a fallen Lucifer, has the unfortunate effect of equating the word Lucifer with Satan, but Lucifer does not mean Satan. It means bringer of light. And one that brings light is a good guy, not a bad guy. But since the fall, he's also called the Prince of Darkness. Now, the Prince of Darkness isn't any bringer of light. So, so that's interesting, that putting that straight, and you'll never hear that preached to you in church.
No,
but,
no, you won't.
But anyway, discerning, you were wanting to know about the discerning of light and dark. And so, yeah, the light, we cannot be aware of light without contrast and this physical reality that we're in. So we have to have this contrast. And this is why when we created this game that we call Earth Life, we created a lot of contrast. The seeds of duality have always been in eternity, but we have manifest those seeds so that we can see this tremendous contrast that's here. So we have to have evil manifest so we can develop the discernment to be able to see the difference between that and appreciate the choices that we make. Because just being at peace and love and tranquility in some primeval existence where there's no change, maybe we got a little bored there and wanted some excitement. So we decided to come down here and make a world where there was good and evil.
So in other words,
yeah, go ahead.
Instead of being the observer of the game, we put ourselves in the game.
Yeah, but to play the game correctly, we have to become the observer. Because imagine you're playing a video game where you have an avatar, and all of a sudden you have your memory wiped that you are not that avatar, and you actually think you're that avatar. Then when that avatar is wounded, you feel his pain. Yet when you go back to being the observer, when you realize, hey, I'm not the avatar, I'm playing, and you become the observer, and then you're not subject to the pain like you would normally be. Okay? And so this is the advantage of being the observer and putting yourself in the state like you're watching a movie. See your whole life is like a movie. And when you're watching a movie, you can feel sympathy for the guy that lost everything in the stock market or whatever, or gambling, or lost his wife. You can feel sympathy, but it's not like you're really there. Okay? If you think you're really there, then you suffer a lot more. If you're just watching the movie, you're emotionally affected, but your suffering is limited. Okay? So when you become the observer, evil doesn't affect you nearly as much as if you see yourself as a full participant. Now, what I try to do in my life, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say that is a wonderful suggestion, especially for what's going on right now in politics, regardless of which side anybody's on. It seems to pull and tug on people, and just being the observer, would help so much. JJ, in your last minute, can you put everything concise? What do you want to make sure everybody goes away with if you only have 1 minute to tell them?
Well, I'll probably go back to the principle of freedom in relation to good and evil, because this is the key. The key is if some politician comes up with something that he wants to pass, you look at it and you say, who does this benefit? Does it just benefit 10% of the population, or does it benefit a large percentage of the population? Now, sometimes if it benefits 10% and the other 90% say this 10% really need it, I'm all for it, then that's not so much of a violation. But if you have 10 or 20% benefiting and 80% grumbling about it, then the principle of freedom is being violated somewhere. And so you want to, most of the time, the majority of the people will support the principle of freedom, but then there are times that the majority are also deceived. And the majority can only be deceived when dark forces get a lot of power over the media. And the dark forces move around a lot. I mean, a lot of people say, well, they're the bankers or Illuminati, the CFR. Well, they move around. They're not always in just one place. They focus on one place, and then as soon as people suspect that there's dark forces there, then they'll move somewhere else. So the dark forces keep moving around, but we can spot them because they want freedom for the minority rather than the majority.
And that is a wonderful conclusion, and I hope everybody takes that to heart. Again, you can see more of JJ's materials at freeread.com. Next week, we have Gail Minogue on our show. She is a trendsetter. She's a business person who watches the trends and says from past trends, this is what's coming next. And so we're going to have her on next week. JJ, thank you so much for joining me. I look forward to seeing you again on our show in 2 months. And this is Sharon Lynn Wyeth signing off, always again with the song Shine.
Thanks.
So long ago, gazing in the mirror, an image of an angel smiling back at her. No wounds or imperfections, just beauty and its glow. Her laughter and her heart, a reflection of her soul. And I want to shine like the sun and smile to stop the rain. And I want to dance with the wind and believe in dreams again. Of life stroke the canvas of her, the light slightly dimmed, her reflection unseen, and all that she